Yes, welcome to In Fellowship. This is the first in 4 events within a series where we're highlighting the ways that we invest in cooperatives. Today, you guys are going to meet some of our fellows from the Co-op Navigator Fellowship, and you're going to hear a little bit about their story. This session is being recorded, so feel free to adjust yourself, your cameras, if you'd not like to be on camera, and feel free to keep yourself engaged however you can, on camera, off camera. We're going to share a little bit about the program, and then we're going to invite the fellows to share a little bit about themselves. Okay? All right. Before we begin, I want to encourage folks who might need it to enable audio transcription. You can select the icons on the bottom of your screen using the images that we're suggesting here. Live transcript, enabling it, and you'll get some captions on there. Another thing before we begin would be to give a little context. The Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, which many of you guys are familiar with, is a nonprofit community development financial institution. And we believe that the future is cooperative, so we support cooperative enterprises. Some of the ways we do that is by providing relevant business skills and connections. We have a learning team that supports cooperative enterprises who are emerging and existing. We provide co-op-friendly financial products at reasonable rates, and we serve as an investment opportunity for socially conscious investors who would like to support socially conscious enterprises. So those are some of the ways we believe and support in cooperative enterprises. So today we're going to be discussing the Co-op Navigator Fellowship. This is an initiative that we've been involved in since 21, developing, and we launched it last year. And this program is a fellowship program for emerging cooperators and co-op developers in communities across the Northeast. We co-created this initiative in fellowship with many organizations in those communities, organizations who are supporting and representative of Black communities, of Latinx communities, of Indigenous communities, from Maine to Rhode Island. And this concept emerged out of those conversations in an attempt to respond to what we saw was limited culturally relevant co-op development capacity. The program is a 3-year fellowship, so these co-op interested organizers and entrepreneurs are involved in a 3-year learning experience where they're partnered with community-based organizations across the Northeast who may be interested in cooperative economics or cooperative enterprise or cooperative development, but don't necessarily have that full capacity. And we're partnering with those organizations to hire, train, and mentor these fellows, right? These local co-op interested organizers and entrepreneurs will go on to serve their communities as co-op navigators. So there's local leaders and local institutions that we're partnering with to make this happen over the course of 3 years. And in these communities of practice, these fellows will receive mentorship, training, and connections by trusted co-op development professionals, like-minded folks who are similar to them, representing communities that are underserved in the larger co-op movement. And all the while, we're hoping to gain exposure to local co-op initiatives identified by their host sites. In those communities of practice and within those organizations that are serving those communities, fellows are going to be able to study successful co-op models, help their communities identify co-opportunities, and they're going to help those host organizations to embed these practices in a long-term manner. And we're doing all this because at CFNE, we recognize that there's a long history in this nation of racially motivated economic exclusion. And that has affected the way co-op development is funded, whether it's urban-rural divide or just from the long legacy of discrimination that is embodied in redlining and mass incarceration all the way back. And so we're hoping to support these emerging communities across the Northeast who we realize have limited access to culturally relevant co-op development. And because of that, we've dedicated over $800,000 to kickstart this 3-year initiative because we're committed to changing the face of the co-op movement, to telling a new narrative about who does co-ops and how communities are working together to solve their problems. So that's a little bit of an overview about the fellowship. I now want to create the opportunity to hear from the fellows themselves. So in front of you, we've got 4 fellows and a 5th one. He's emerging. He's he's getting there, and I want to give them the opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves and the communities they're serving. Right? Who are the people who are in these communities that you're working in, that you're from, and how they navigate in the challenge of working together to solve their problems. So first, I want to invite Jorge. Why don't you kick us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and the communities you're serving.
Well, hello. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jorge Saborio. I'm a cooperative director in Fuerza Laboral. Fuerza Laboral was founded in 2006. We serve in all Rhode Island, but we're located in Central Falls. Central Falls has a population of 22,000 people, and it's an estimated 6,000 of them undocumented. So we working with this community, or also minorities, formerly incarcerated people, victims of exploitation. So we creating like a hub and trying to build these cooperatives around this community, trying to change, the way of labor on this area.
Excellent. Thank you, Jorge. That's pretty wild when you think about it, right? In an area of 22,000, over a third being undocumented and having to navigate the challenges of labor, of having enough money to feed their families. Appreciate you, Jorge. Want to invite up next, Desiree. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the community you're serving?
Oh, thank you so much, Johan, and everyone for putting this together today. I'm Desiree Nicole Lester, and I am in Portland, Maine. That's my hometown. And my host site is 4 Directions Development Corporation, which is located in Orono, Maine. And a little bit about me is I was born and raised in Maine and kind of moved out when I was 18 and wanted to go to bigger cities where I thought there was more opportunities and, kind of looking for my career home. And so it's really nice to be, back in my hometown for this fellowship and to find a cooperative community emerging here. And so at 4 Directions, Maine, I've lived in Maine my entire life, and I'm sad to say that, I was never educated about Wabanaki tribes growing up and living here my entire life. So it's really, really special and important to me to be here and to be hosted by 4 Directions Development Corporation. And the Wabanaki, and to learn more about the Wabanaki community here, which are 5 tribes, which is the Micmac, the Maliseet, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes in Pleasant Point in Indian Township. And so as far right now, 4 Directions Maine is the only native CDFI in New England, which I think is a really big deal. And one major challenge to the tribes is unemployment. And that, I see that growing in communities all over, but coupled with a strong lack of workforce is really the challenge that we're addressing. And that's a little bit about 4 Directions and a little bit about me and the impact that I'm hoping to have. So
appreciate you. A little sneak peek. All right. Next, I want to invite up Steph to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the communities that you're serving.
Sure. Hey, y'all. Nice to be here. My name is Steph Wiley. I am a native New Yorker, Queens. I'm in Brooklyn and in Poughkeepsie, New York. I am representing Black Farmer Fund and Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, who work on getting financial resources and land resources to Black farmers and food actors in Northeast. And I'm also an owner of a cooperative in Brooklyn called Brooklyn Packers. And we do packing, sourcing, and delivering of food to locally, hyper-locally in Brooklyn. And we do that in many ways. One big way is that we have a farm share that we own and manage and produce every week. And we deliver food to folks. And we also do large-scale food aggregation, and we provide food to nonprofits and mutual aid groups and things of that nature. And so I'm very interested in the health and wealth outcomes of my community in Brooklyn and Poughkeepsie, being large and a small Black urban center. And connecting farmers and food actors to resources that they might not have otherwise. So yeah, thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Steph. And I just want to point out the importance of, the last two introductions, specifically referring to who they're serving, right? The Wabanaki tribes. You grew up there and haven't seen them and learned about them, and the Black farmer community down in the city. I think it's so important to refer to who we're speaking about. A lot of the times, the needs and the challenges that are unique to the communities we're serving get lost in these larger labels, minorities or BIPOC. So I think it's really important for us to point to who we're serving and, make that relevant to the fact that we're serving them. So thank you, guys. Next, I want to invite up Swain to share a little bit about yourself and the community you're serving.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Swain. I'm a Navigator Fellow for the Capital Region Co-op Connection. We're a knowledge share community. We provide technical assistance to businesses who are co-op curious and individuals who want to learn more. In the past year or so, we've done a couple walking tours in the Capital Region, community dinner, and hosted some monthly resource knowledge exchange shares where we'll have different people come on. Steph is somebody that's been on to talk about Brooklyn Packers. And it's crazy to even see us here now, because I was reading Steph's name and about them in emails maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, before I was a fellow, and now we're both fellows. And that's also just a testament to building community within this ecosystem. But yeah, my name is Swain, and our organization is based out of Troy, New York.
Excellent. Excellent. Yep. Appreciate you, Swain. We're building community. Building community. All right. I want to invite Varun to share a little bit, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the communities you're serving.
Thank you. Hey, y'all. Varun, here in Hartford, Connecticut, my hometown where I was born, and also, yeah, Hartford, for those of you who don't know, it's an incredibly, Black, Caribbean, West Indian city. And I think I'm a South Asian immigrant myself. My parents, are immigrants, their parents are refugees. And so growing up kind of, yeah, I think I also, relate to Desiree and like not, being really isolated, like in a very close knit immigrant community, being really isolated from a lot of the organizing work happening around here in Hartford. And I think I'm based out of Reset. It's my host organization. Reset is a nonprofit here in Hartford, whose mission is to advance the social enterprise sector. So we have a co-working space, we run incubators, accelerators, we do coaching and public programming to inspire innovation and collaboration to support entrepreneurs, doing work to develop solutions to community challenges. And so primarily working with women of color entrepreneurs across multiple sectors, doing work in food and cannabis and retail. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here with y'all. Co-ops, and to be learning and alongside all of you and co-creating and who are my people. I mean, I'm a little bit about me is I'm a former teacher. I was a high school teacher. I was a community organizer. And I really come out of the immigrant rights movement, doing work, some of that mutual aid work, rapid response work, undocumented communities or communities in particular, I'm interested in I've been working with and trying to think about how can we create economic solutions to help our immigrant communities build power and wealth. And also thinking about just the exploitation in the workplace is a real issue that I experience as a teacher, as a nonprofit worker. So my kind of journey into the co-op world is really a journey through, of thinking about, for myself, selfishly, like, what does it look like to have more autonomy, to have more power as a worker. And so excited to be in this conversation. Thanks, y'all.
Excellent. Really appreciate that, Varun. And I think, as you and Swain kind of alluded to, not all of us were here a year or 2 years ago, right? So the world today is looking a little better from where I'm concerned. It's handsome, beautiful, and capable and competent, and we're getting there, right? So the world today, we can recognize, is a little better, but we still feel and can see and experience that in our communities, our needs aren't necessarily centered or being responding to as far as creating co-ops in our communities. And there's still barriers around resources, right? But in the last 5 years, that's getting better. So Varun shared a little bit about where you're coming from in this journey. And we recognize that we're all coming from different places and we're all at different stages. Some of us are entrepreneurs who've become more and more interested in cooperative economics over time. Some of us are movement builders who recognize the need for enterprise and business solutions in helping our communities to navigate these problems. And some of us have been involved in cooperation for quite some time and have been navigating that process. But we are only now seeing some of the fruits of our labor, some of the tips of the iceberg, and we don't really see what's going on in the background. So can we get a little bit more about your journey into cooperation, some of the challenges that folks have faced, the characters they've encountered, and who's been able to navigate that effectively or not so effectively? And I'd like to invite Steph to kick us off. Tell us a little bit about the emerging world, the world we're getting to.
Well, so I have about 8 years experience in co-ops. I was in a co-op academy a long time ago when they kind of first started doing them. And I was really lucky to kind of be one of a few co-ops that were developed through a nonprofit in Brooklyn at the time. And, I believe there were, at that time, probably less than 20 co-ops in New York City. And now there are a lot more. And so it's really great to see more and more co-ops developed, in the city and broadly in the Northeast. New York City is unique because they have their co-op development ecosystem is it's financed through discretionary funds, the New York City Council, and that's very unique. And so there's 15 or more nonprofits that help develop co-ops in New York City specifically, and also do advocacy for co-ops. I was for a time professionally a co-op advocate through New York City Network of Worker-Owned Cooperatives, which is kind of like the trade organization of co-ops in New York City. And I learned a lot about co-ops through that relationship, and also through development, helping to develop my own co-op. My co-op is probably 7-8 years in now. The challenges are there, but I do believe, as probably one of the older co-ops in the city now, I feel like we're still emerging in a lot of ways. We're still learning about who we are and what resources out there, and advocating for more resources. And so I firmly believe, just like Johan said, the co-op, I think the future is co-op. And so I really believe that, and really happy to be part of this Navigator Fellowship, and be moving the needle forward in this work.
Gotcha. And to follow up, did you, in your journey to where you are now with your co-op, feel like you had access to, culturally relevant co-op development, even in that kind of saturated context, or maybe in other contexts? I know you've had other projects.
In a word, no. Not culturally relevant. It's interesting because, as you probably know, if you don't know, the most of the co-ops in, I would say probably this country, are mostly immigrant led and female led. And so a lot of co-op developers come to our neighborhoods to develop co-ops, which are mostly Black and brown folks. But the cultural aspect is mostly left out. And that's an important indicator of who is coming to develop co-ops in our neighborhood. It's gotten better, I would say. I would say it's gotten better in some ways. I think what's really special, my experience in this particular Co-op Navigator Fellowship, is that we were being very intentional about the cultural relevant centering of how we should be. We're co-creating how we should be developing co-ops through, from a human-centered, Black and brown-centered vision or framework. And it's much different, and it's really refreshing for me, as a person who's been in it for a long time, probably longer than most, that this is the framework that we're helping to create together. It's one of the best things I've ever done.
Gotcha. Appreciate that. I'd like to invite, another one of you to follow up on that. Seems like I'm sensing some energy there. Who else can relate to that? Whether or not you've had 8 years in the game or you're coming into it. Desiree?
Hey there.
Hey.
Yes, being in that space, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier in my journey of, figuring out career-wise, where do I belong? And, working in the corporate world, I went from being in Maine, which is, much small town. I know everyone. I have really deep connections to navigating in New York City, where, I didn't really know anyone, and I had to make a way and kind of make a name for myself, which, really taught me how to kind of have grit. And I got into a lot of startups. I'm in that space where I'm usually meeting folks in that startup phase and supporting their mission or their dream, or finding collectives that have, a business idea, and okay, we're ready to, we're turning this into a collective. That's what I found myself faced with a lot, is kind of no real formal structure or business model used, but you know, I graduated from undergrad in 2008, and it was the recession, and you had to find new ways to work. And so when we were graduating, that's what we were figuring out. You know, we were like, oh, let's start a collective for the podcast we want to do, and just creating these new revenue streams and enterprises. And I didn't think of it as a cooperative model, you know, but as I continue to move and work and figure out where I want to be, you know, I got guided to this fellowship, doing my own research, and like, I think that this is kind of the model that makes sense for me, but it's also the one that is aligned with my personal beliefs and, you know, how I want to see my revenue move, not just be spent. And so, you know, to be here in this position now, it feels, and not only to be in this position, but to have the host site that I have here in Maine, because an element of it feels like returning to principles that have kind of been wiped out in a gift sort of economy, one that, you know, where the rewards really go to the workers, not just the one who kind of owns the business. So that's not good at ending that, but
No, that's great.
That's kind of what comes up in, like, you know, where my thoughts are, where I'm at in the cooperative journey. So I'm a newer person, but at the same time, you know, it's a bit of remembering and returning to like the core elements of myself that I feel like maybe I lost when I went to school in New York City, having grown up in Maine, and, you know, knowing what I really value. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, we're green and we're mindful, but like, you know, it's like, it's okay. It's more common to like say you're green than to really be doing the work of what it means to be a sustainable enterprise. You know what I mean? So seeing a lot of that and figuring out like, okay, how do I take it to the next level? So it's not just like the thing that sounds pretty or looks pretty, but it's also, you know, it's starting to get a little deeper than the surface level. So
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Something that really stuck out to me with that, and something we've talked about, is the idea of remembering or reemergence. You know, a lot of us look at the mainstream co-op movement and we don't see ourselves there, and we think we're heading into that. But actually it's a homecoming, right? When we look at our communities, I know Black communities are involved in this work, and they might call themselves a collective. And that distinction in terms doesn't necessarily connotate the difference in values or philosophy. It's just a distinction between what we're calling them, and that distinction facilitates a separation from this ecosystem, from the resources that are available and might be available to support them. And I think, you know, the powerful thing about that is that we already are engaged in cooperative economics, right? We're already working together to solve problems in our communities. And if we had support, we can do so even better, right? We're not going to be this. Exactly. So to me, that's really powerful. I want to invite anyone who can relate to that idea of remembrance or reemergence, because nature is cooperative, and we're getting into that, right? We're trying to wipe some of these barriers in our perception and in our environment. Varun, anything to add to that?
Yeah, there's so much I could say. Where do I begin? I mean, I think, you know, I also, like Desiree, I'm feel like a baby in co-op world. I'm, you know, new to this language, or maybe the framework, but not new to the, you know, to the core values of cooperation. And I think it's been so helpful to see, just to see examples of what this can look like. Because I think, you know, growing up in Connecticut, you know, where we're in between, you know, I grew up like really, you know, kind of in between New York City and Western Massachusetts, where there's so much co-op activity. And there's so very little here. And so it didn't even seem like a, you know, a pathway, right? It didn't even seem like a possibility. And I remember, you know, discovering Aorta. Aorta was the first co-op that I really kind of connected with. I'm a facilitator, and yeah, yeah, learning about the Anti-Oppression Resource and Training Alliance and their model was so inspiring, and I think it really is part of why I'm. I back in 2020, there was a number of us facilitators that were involved in police abolition work and mutual aid organizing work here in Connecticut. And we started a project called the People Saturday School, which is, and we were really operating, I think we didn't have any money. We had no money. But we were really operating as a cooperative in a lot of ways, even though we didn't have that language. And and so, when we're fast forward 3 years now, I think having this fellowship has allowed me to really return to that project and really kind of have the time and the space to really dream and research and and recognize that this isn't new. This is new, maybe feels new to me, but I think there's so much. I as someone who taught ethnic studies, right? Like I'm really interested in our people's history, and I think we need to study our people's history to inform the work that we do, and so it's been great to come into this work through this explicitly through the lens that we're doing the work, because I think that isn't across the board, that's not what co-op development looks like. And it's okay to not know the answers, right? It's okay to not have all the language or the training or the credentials, but that doesn't mean that we don't belong in this work. And I think that's a struggle I'm still every day dealing with. It's like the imposter syndrome. Like, who am I? Who am I to do this work? And I have to remind myself that this isn't, it's more than just the. Yeah, and I mean, it's an ancestral work. It's like intergenerational work that we're doing here.
Absolutely. Finding that belonging. And it's hard to belong if there's no community, or at least perceived community. And I think that initial framing of, not many of us here in the world today, it changes if you add left, right? Because our ancestors have been doing this work. And it changes if you add yet, because it's promising towards the future. So I think both are true at the same time, and it's pretty wild. All right, Jorge, anything to add about where you're coming from in this journey?
Well, I haven't been on this for too long. I was in the process of creating a co-op myself, but I also I'm the president of a nonprofit organization, so helping the community. I'm co-founder of this organization also, so I've been always trying to help my community. So then I met Raul in Fuerza Laboral, trying to create my own cooperative. Then I fell in love with the project. And all of a sudden, this opportunity opened up, and I said, wow, this is a perfect match for me, so I can keep helping my community. So when I think in like sustainability, I think in co-ops, because business is so hard. And I think by doing it together, instead of two trying to register an LLC, if you get 6, 7 people together, it's a lot easier. So we can build this ecosystem in business co-op. I think this way we can own the future. I think the future is co-ops. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Preachers cooperative. And business is hard. You've had a lot of interesting experiences in business. Everybody shared at a time. Swain, anything to add about how you're coming into this movement and your journey into cooperation and cooperative economics?
I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've owned too many businesses to count over the years, closed too many, started some co-owned, co-founded, sold, acquired, mergers and acquisitions. So it was kind of, years of doing things with, no formal education, just testing and learning, but knowing that I always wanted to be doing things in community, in unison. and just getting around to the point of, how do we formalize that? So now, here we are.
Here we are. And I think, that's a great segue into the next point, where we're talking about this next world that's possible because we're in community and because we're part of this fellowship, right? So I want to talk about that learning opportunity, this experience of being a Co-op Navigator Fellow. How is this experience demonstrating the value of fellowship to you, and what impact is it having on you, your host site, or your community? I want to invite Jorge. Would you mind sharing a little bit about this learning experience and the impact it's having?
What can I tell you, Johan? I'm learning so much with the fellows. Just by listening, I learn with their own experience. Every day we meet together, I learn something new, something that I can apply to my life and to my work.
Excellent. Excellent. And some of us have been through kind of co-op specific training. You mentioned being a part of a co-op academy, Steph. How is this experience distinct from something you've experienced before? Gotta unmute you. I'm gonna hear you.
Yeah. So so a lot of co-ops, my feeling has been through my experience and seeing how co-ops have been developed from the beginning when I started. It was a kind of a rush to develop as many co-ops as possible, 7 or 8 years ago. And I don't think it's necessarily the intention of co-op developers and nonprofits to want to do it that way. But when the funding for co-op development is tied to metrics that require you to develop many, the number of co-ops developed is the benchmark for how you get funded, which I will argue is one way, not the best way though. And so a lot of co-ops were developed, and like the co-ops that were developed with me in the beginning with our co-op, they just didn't survive. Some just really never really launched, and some launched and just, ran out of money really quickly and could not continue. And it's demoralizing in a lot of ways. And it kind of, is not good for the ecosystem, for the co-op ecosystem. And we were very lucky. My co-op has been very lucky to be a very specific and unique co-op that does food distribution in a way that nobody else does it. And also, my co-op has been made up of people who have had their own businesses before they came into co-ops. And so there's been over time 4 or 5 people that came in and out that had more business experience than most co-ops start with. And so that's a real advantage. I will say that what I think is missing in all of this is what has been missing in all of this is a very intentional, slow, deliberate pace that aims to go deeper into what cooperatives are and can do, and really center the human being in all aspects, and also like know that we're coming into this with different levels of experience. So, when a co-op developer comes into a community and says, okay, like, an information session, a whole bunch of people will come, and, what they typically do is try to say, okay, what does your neighborhood need? What do you need in your neighborhood? Absolutely. You want to know what the neighborhood needs. How can you, what is a business that can come of that need? And some people are like, a lot of it has been like cleaning companies, dog walking companies, tutoring companies, those types of things. And those have been successful. Because a lot of those people have the experience doing those things already. But, what tends to not work is when there's no like deliberate business training that is kind of long and ongoing, and also there's no relationship building. And I will argue that the relationship building is probably the more important thing, especially in the beginning. Because if you don't get along with the people, if you don't know the people, if you're not connected with the people that are helping you run this business, who are your business partners, then I think there is a really low percentage of success. And this is me going through this, and I've launched 2 co-ops. One is, I'm only involved in one now, and that is mainly because the relational aspect that was not taken into account when we launched it. That's my experience. And what I think is different about the Co-op Navigator Fellowship is that we are very deliberate, and it's a really great pace, and we are co-creating this together. We're not rushing, and we're really getting to know each other. And that feels really good, and I will even say unique, and even I will say special. And so that is what is going to keep us all engaged in this. Like, when we are accountable to each other in a way that has nothing to do with dollars and cents. It's actually like, I want to feel good around the people that I am with and I'm working with. And I hope, I think that with the relational bond, you have more of a chance of getting through the really tough relational things and also financial things as you go along. Yeah, I will just end there, because of course there's a lot more.
No, very, very powerful. Seconding Coach Carmen's comments in the chat. That relationship really does secure what's possible, and create a sense of resiliency, and even encourages this project to be a labor of love, going deeper. So appreciate that. Want to invite up Desiree to share a little bit about those relationships that are being built, and how those relationships are impacting you and encouraging your growth.
Yeah, I will definitely echo, Jorge setting out, like, at each session that we come together, I'm always learning or finding some alignment with the other fellows, so hearing the stories of what each person is up to or what they're experiencing is so valuable. And that's a big part of being in community and cooperation, is, do you have enough time to listen so that you can actually find that, I think in our January session, it was about human-centered enterprise, and finding that minimum lovable product about like each person or each experience. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Like, that's what I'm like walking away with, and why I think this training is so valuable is that, usually when I come into an experience, like I have like maybe a 1-year contract to get something done, and it's like hit the ground running, like here's like an inbox full of messages to go through, and like, this is how your onboard is, like look through all these emails, and now with the design of this fellowship, I know that for the next 3 years that I can be in relationship with my host site so that I can deeply listen and amplify and support what they're doing, not just like coming in like I've got these solutions and this is my agenda. I can actually have that space to relax into getting to know them, and finding that love energy, which is very high vibrational, which you don't usually come into a fellowship or a workspace with, or the opportunity to do so, or even the invitation. So, I feel like that's definitely having a deep impact on me, and everything all the projects that I'm involved in, my mind is just like, okay, how do I make this a cooperative type of solution? Because that's clearly how I work. That's where my principles are aligned. So like, how do I bring it into each situation? And right now, besides, being hosted by this fellowship, I was already in that space where I'm part of a collective that, no real formal structure. And it's like in this moment where it's like falling apart, but it's like, ooh, maybe it's about to transform. And so I'm bringing that mindset to that project. And then I know there's a few people in here from Maine Artist Co-Housing, which, I just got invited to be on their steering committee and work with them and figure out artist co-housing solutions. So like now I'm like finding these little projects, which is in alignment with the way that I work, because before I would, get a 1-year contract and work on a project and kickstart it and it would become sustainable and like get into motion. And I would think, oh, I'm gonna be on board. And it's like, actually, I've done my work and now I'm stepping away from this. And that's okay too. So now I feel more confident with, not having to have like to go from high touch to low touch is okay. It's okay. And being in that space of like, actually, that's how it kind of should work. And that's okay too, So it gives me opportunities to make new connections. And instead of saying like, I have, having like some quota of like, I have to like start this many cooperatives, it's like, oh, how many cooperatives can I connect with and bring together so that it becomes an ecosystem? And that's what I see here that is emerging, is an ecosystem,
Excellent. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Swain, I want to give you an opportunity to tune into this piece. As a serial entrepreneur, you come with a business sense, and as a serial fellowshipper as well. You've been a part of a few fellowships. What do you think is what do you think is distinct with this experience, and how these relationships that you're building impacting you and the work you're doing?
I'll say one thing is the ease of consistency. Most fellowships are long and drawn out over time. I mean, this is a 3-year fellowship, but we're meeting weekly with our host sites, with our fellows. We're meeting weekly with project team leaders, different people who have different roles within the organization. We might be talking to community members or, in my case, founders who will eventually be the people who own the co-op that I'm working on, and finding out what their needs are, and then relaying that to the people that I'm talking to. But the consistency just makes it easy to stay on track, and also to be able to communicate with everybody what's going on and figure out what we all need from each other. And the communication later on top of that, everybody wants to listen, everybody wants to know what you need, and also people don't have a problem telling you where they're at. I like the transparency, and I think that's one thing that most people struggle with, is how to be transparent with one another, share their pain points, their struggles, and their fears. And this fellowship makes it easy for us to understand that within ourselves and figure out how to work through that with other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. You know, there's a level of vulnerability that we try to embody, and that comes with you guys. You guys are really the special secret sauce to that, you know, as Steph was saying. And I think that's a powerful ingredient that we don't often see, especially within the, you know, so-called industry of professionals who are trying to engage this work. So love that, appreciate that. I'm going to give you an opportunity as well, Varun, talk a little bit about the fellowship and its impact. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to echo really, you know, what Steph and Desiree, you were talking about in terms of the pace. You know, I wrote those words down, Steph, that you said: intentional, slow, deliberate. Because I think, you know, it's really, yeah, I mean, it's been the shift in my life. It's been sort of really the big shift in how I approach my work, and in general is really to slow down. I think, you know, the crises that we're dealing with in our society, right? The lack of, you know, affordable housing and healthcare, and you know, the prison industrial complex, and, you know, I mean, they're real crises. Like, they're not. And I think, you know, if we do this work, you know, I've learned, you know, sometimes the hard way, like operating from that place of urgency and scarcity, and, you know, just always reacting, actually doesn't get us very far in the long term. And so, you know, that was the lesson when I started. You know, I mentioned the People Saturday School earlier. You know, this project that, you know, we founded in 2020, and yeah, we were just moving so fast, and we loved each other and we loved the work, but it actually, you know, we burnt out, and I think it's, you know, for so many of us, I think, you know, living with, you know, mental illness or disabilities, it's like it really not healthy or sustainable to work the way that often a lot of, you know, jobs require us to work. And I think the 3 years is, I've never in my life had, you know, the opportunity to think 3 years ahead. You know, I mean, I've moved, I'm about to renew my lease, y'all, and it's the first time I've ever renewed a lease. You know, I mean, I've moved 15 times in the past decade, right? And it's like, how can you build something that's gonna last without some degree of stability? You know, I mean, just having health insurance. I mean, through this fellowship, I'm able to have health insurance. Like, that is, I don't take that for granted. Do I always use it? No. but to just know that it's allowed me to really focus on building my, you know, my cooperative with that same intentional, slow, deliberate pace. And, you know, so that we can work through conflict in a more generative way, and we can, just because it's this isn't work that's gonna, you know, we're not gonna, even in 3 years, y'all, right? We're not gonna, you know, transform the whole world in 3 years. It's really, you know, it's like 3 generations, maybe.
Yep.
You know, if we do the work the right way. And so that's been that's been huge. And I'm really I just also echo what folks have said, just learning from you all. I mean, I'm Desiree, excited to like follow up with you and learn more about the cooperative housing, because that's a lot of, you know, a lot of artists here in Hartford. That's one of the projects I'm working with, is a group of artists looking for cooperative housing here in Hartford. You know, we have folks, you know, food cooperatives that I'm working with. We have, you know, folks in retail, folks, you know, and so I think it's, you know, like, so Swain, what you're working on, it's just all so exciting to me. The fact that we have cooperatives built into the language and in cannabis, in the cannabis laws in Rhode Island, right? And I mean, that's huge. I mean, we just, this in Connecticut, we just launched our adult use market right in January, and I think that's an area where we're interested in learning more about how can co-ops, as we build this a new market, right? This new here in Connecticut, what is the role co-ops can play? And so, so just really, taking our time and trying to do it right, because I think it's we've seen so many projects come and go, and I think I really, it's like Steph said, it can be really demoralizing, and I think part of what through this project, it's and it's just in my life, it's gonna really ultimately it's about cultivating hope, capacity, and mutual responsibility. That's how I see it in my work. Is like, how are we cultivating hope, people's sense of hope, capacity, and mutual responsibility. So yeah.
Excellent, very powerful. Really appreciate everyone's responses. It just makes me think about this next world that we're trying to embody through the fellowship, and how powerful it is to have space. In our communities, we don't often have space, right? Space to think and work on the crises that we're experiencing every day, right? We still don't have space to deal with this after so many generations, and trying to create a new space, a table that where we are the folks who are inviting folks in, because we have the space to think, and we can extend ourselves into the future and hopefully pass on this culture of taking up space to the next generation. So some of you started to mention your projects. Let's dive in. Let's dive into some of the projects that you believe are going to contribute to this future we believe in, right? This cooperative future. I want to invite you guys to share a little bit about that. Jorge, what are you working on that you think is going to fuel this dream?
Well, right now, we are working on construction cooperatives and painters. We also working with building a, we get together with all the many co-ops. We got meetings like every 2 months. So I think it's a need here in Rhode Island for cooperative associations. Somehow they want like an umbrella to cover, to protect like legally and a lot of stuff like that. So they're planning and create an association, a cooperative association. We're also working with the cooperatives on cannabis. Working with, on that side, we're working with former incarcerated people. And we're also working right now in an event of the State Day of Cooperatives. It's gonna be soon, in a couple of months. So we're recruiting people, especially working hard on the construction. We're reaching out these people, like I said before, a lot of them are undocumented people and victims of labor exploitation. So we giving it like a hope, and I'm meeting with them like in person with every single them, getting very close and knowing the human side of them, digging into the human side and the problems that they're dealing with every day. Like we have in a group like 2 women in this project, and they're single mothers. So they really have to work very hard to sustain their families. So they love this project. They're very hard workers. They work like a man. They're really hard, very hard workers. And I think they deserve a chance on this co-op. They're very hard workers. I got people on this co-op working for a long time. Some of them have 20 years experience. They never had a chance. So now they have a chance. Some of them speak English fluently. They have a lot of experience. So they just deserve a chance. And I think this is the chance, the big chance for them. So they're very interested in doing this on their own business. So I think this is gonna be very good for this community. It's not gonna be fast, but we're building it. We're trying to build really solid columns. We're working with the, right now we're working with the construction, we're working with the union, the painters unions in Rhode Island. So it's something that's gonna burn together with the union. It's
Gotcha.
one of my main projects right now.
Excellent. Sounds powerful and needed, right? And one of the things that I think about is what happens if something like that doesn't exist, right? What happens for those mothers? What happens for those men and women who are trying to find a way in this economy and are being exploited? So really appreciate your efforts there. I want to invite Swain to share a little bit about your project and the impact it may have.
And use the biggest bowl.
Inspiring the kids. The kids are here to listen. That's what we're all about.
So, my project is gonna be an e-commerce and retail cooperative. Calling it right now, it's gonna be called ERC. So essentially, we're gonna have vendors and members from the Co-op Connection would be the founding members, and they would start to build this co-op together. Eventually, it's going to be a vertically integrated marketplace that has a brick and mortar location that, you know, the founders, they can sell their merchandise there. They can do pop-ups, they can host classes, do pickup for merchandise, delivery, and then all of that would be supported by a e-commerce website, like think Etsy, but stronger with delivery, local. They'd also be able to do warehousing and storage at the same location. So that's pretty much the overall thought and vision for that project.
Gotcha. And why do you think it's needed, at least the cooperative economic aspect is needed, and how is it supporting those vendors?
Most times as a vendor, when you're trying to sell something on a platform, you're going to pay them anywhere from 10 to 20% of the cost. And more than likely, you're either going to have to mark it up or they're going to have to mark it up. It causes a disconnect between like direct to consumer or business to business sales. I think that there's more opportunity in direct sales, but doing it cooperatively, obviously, it will cut down cost on website hosting, marketing, SEO, things like that, being able to just funnel. And most founders, for the most part, they're not selling more than 10 UPCs, 20 UPCs anyways. So I think some consolidation efforts and being able to do different things in different markets would be something that allows them to reach new audiences.
Gotcha. All right, yeah, appreciate that. Resident entrepreneur and capitalist dropping the jargon, the UPCs with yeah. No, I think that's very powerful to really take the business world into community and help us all reconcile the complexities there. Appreciate that. All right, Varun, do you mind sharing a little bit about your project and the impact you're hoping it's going to have?
I'm working on really two main buckets. The first being just building our regional cooperative ecosystem, just connecting the folks across the state of Connecticut that are currently, involved in a cooperative or are interested in cooperatives. A lot of us, because we're, we've relatively low co-op activity here. I think there's like a lot of it's startups, in really early stages of business development, but just creating the infrastructure so that we can learn from each other, better access, technical assistance and funding, and even just create awareness, just broader awareness around, cooperation. And so, we have assembled an advisory board, and we have of folks across, primarily right now in Hartford and New Haven, who are interested in building a regional cooperative network. We don't even have a name yet. We're taking it slow, really just trying to get to know each other before we launch publicly. And yeah, starting, this spring to be just hosting community conversations, just getting people together, feeding them and learning about their cooperative dreams, and assessing, doing some asset mapping and needs assessment, to hopefully one day in the future, have a co-op academy here in Hartford, our co-op academy in New Haven. But I think it's going to take a lot of work to get there, and a lot of funding, a lot of money to get there, but also just a lot of strategic planning and a lot of organizing. And so I think that's, one of the main projects I'm working on here. And then I mentioned a few times that, my baby, which is the People's Saturday School, which is a, abolitionist popular education, peer counseling and conflict mediation cooperative, that I'm also in the early stages of developing. So I'm running a praxis group, community of practice, for 6 months for cohort. We have a group of 18 people interested in joining, building, a cooperative with me around, really, with a mission around cultivating healthier, safer, and more democratic schools, organizations, and movements. So I see the People's Saturday School as, my hope is that to help really be another technical assistance provider for folks dealing with conflict and struggling to make, build consensus. And so I think that's, one of the key areas that I'm in as a facilitator, I feel like I can contribute to this movement, is helping with process, and thinking about how do we not fall apart when we encounter conflict, because it's so hard. It's like so much easier said than done, and it's a lot of unlearning that we have to do to be able to actually show up and work with each other. It's like really hard.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm up to.
Very powerful. I think you said it. Things fall apart, but nature and the natural way of an ecosystem flourishing is from people coming together. It's so difficult to feel like you're alone because of conflict, and I think that's going to be very powerful. Appreciate you. Desiree, would you mind sharing a little bit about your project and the impact you're hoping it's going to have?
Yes, I am in the space right now where, just thinking about or working through and doing the research through this fellowship, and Four Directions Maine. My understanding so far is really around supporting and amplifying the work that they already do. And that is really, again, Varun touched on it around, technical assistance and offering a cooperative model and the benefits and kind of presenting it as an alternative. That's a large part of the work. And the hope is through this, kind of like being this late fellow that is in relationship with CFNE and also in relationship with Four Directions and many other cooperatives through the fellowship, is again creating like this economic ecosystem. That is the hope. But and so doing that's taking the same work that we're doing here as fellows together, and kind of really being able to translate that in a meaningful way to the tribes in Maine. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, one of the biggest challenges is unemployment, and also, the restrictions from state legislation. And so through this fellowship, it just gives me an opportunity to just amplify those struggles, amplify what they're working on and what those hopes are. And then, I look forward to getting into the space where, I have very specific projects to share, or that I'm able to, create with the community as a result of, their voices and what they've articulated. And right now, to make sure that I'm capturing that voice, in the community, just starting to activate listening sessions, but also just taking the time to reflect back what I'm learning just by, having my own little podcast of what, as a way to document what I'm learning, what I'm hearing, and giving an opportunity for folks to kind of articulate back like, hey, that's right, or that's really wrong, or, putting myself out there and being vulnerable in that way, by sharing what I'm learning and making it available to others as soon as I can. So that's where I am as far as like picking out the project. Right now, the project for me is really making sure that I get to know 4 Directions really well, and that I'm in support and amplifying everything that they do. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, you're the voice, sometimes, the work is amplifying that voice, unearthing those hidden histories and talking about it. So, much respect there. Very powerful. I think I want to invite Steph to share a bit about his project and the impact it's going to have. And then we'll ask one final question before opening up to audience questions.
So I guess the simplest way I can put what I'm doing is I'm helping to develop a cooperatively owned food distribution system that centers Black and brown folks. And I do that through direct relationships with Black-owned and BIPOC-owned farms, through my already existing co-op, Brooklyn Packers, who does transportation and transportation logistics, through developing food hubs in the Northeast, in all parts of the Northeast. These things are important because we need to control where our food comes from and where our food is going and who we are feeding and feeding ourselves, to really affect the health outcomes in our communities. We largely don't we don't really control what food comes into our neighborhoods, or what kind, the quality of the food that comes to our neighborhood. And we are not making money from our own food. So I think this is a way to stem off a lot of bad things happening in our neighborhoods that have to do with inequality, economic, and also health. So yeah, I mean, I believe in co-op as life. So that's broadly what I'm doing. But food is the way I believe that we can get it done in a more strategic way.
Excellent. So that's it. The final question I want to ask is actually, I think, probably applicable to everyone in this room and beyond. And the question is, what does change in the face of the cooperative movement look like? All right, what does it mean to you? What is coming up, right? And so you can take a minute. Folks in the chat, I want to encourage you to drop your answers in, right? 1, 2, 3 words. And I'm gonna give you guys each a minute to share something about that. Okay. All right. So kind of a tricky situation. But let's take it in reverse order. Steph, changing the face of the co-op movement, right? And audience members, let's see what you got.
I think that's us.
Yeah.
I think that's us. We're changing the face. Us right here. on these screens.
These-
Everybody that's here, like we are, we're doing the work. It's not just theory. It's not a feasibility study. It's actually the work that is actually happening and actually has been happening in smaller ways. But I think this puts names and faces in the forefront and highlights actually what change can look like in this ecosystem. And I'm really proud to be a part of it.
Excellent. Appreciate you. We are a bunch of faces, aren't we? All right, Desiree, any quick thoughts on that?
Oh, many thoughts, but
Mhm.
mainly just the changes that I'm looking for, are really around having an input on how you spend and where it goes. And I love what Steph said about the food, like these indicators, these happiness indicators, can I walk to work? Can I eat locally grown food? It's just like this ability to return to simple things, simple connections. But also just thinking about the changes, what do they look like? I mean, for me, it looks like more opportunities to know your neighbors, to know who's around you, to know where your food comes from, where your dollars are going when you spend them, and being very mindful about that. I think that I think we're going to see a lot more of that mindfulness around where is the revenue stream landing when you're spending it, and that's really going to change what our future looks like. That mindfulness, that awareness, that intentionality around the revenue stream and where it goes. So
Love that. Knowing your neighbors and seeing how ideas and money is connected to those people. Love that. Varun, quick thought.
The faces. So I love what also was written in the chat. Changing the face also means changing our protocols when we gather. I think it's not just who, but how. Yeah, because I think we've seen the limitations of representation. We've seen institutions, see Black and brown faces, in capitalist institutions do very little to actually change the experiences of people on the ground. And shift power dynamics. And so I think it's not just about, just people that look like us being in positions of leadership. I think it's, how are we rethinking, reimagining, expanding our field to mean that it's more accessible and more, and really like, more aligned around a shared vision for a future, right? Where, we share power and where we can survive and thrive. Yeah.
Appreciate that, right? More than a face, right? We got a body too, hands and legs. Let's get some other parts in there. Appreciate that. Jorge, any closing thoughts on changing the face of the cooperative movement?
You know what, John? Long time ago, I think I heard about co-ops. I didn't really pay attention. I thought it was just a system, I didn't really pay attention. Now we're reaching out people and letting them know there is another way of business. So I think the difference now is that we're trying to reach out and inform people that this is going on. And this is another way to do business, a better way to do business together. So that is different right now. We're changing that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Then people know it's for them, right? Because you might have seen something and you had no clue it was for you, but this is for you as well. Appreciate that. Swain, final thoughts and changing the face of the co-op movement?
You know, I think ultimately, throughout this process and at the end of it all, I just want to see more community-owned assets, be that brick and mortar, be that real estate, community centers, you know, however that comes across in your individual communities. But you know, it's definitely time for less private corporations, or even sometimes, depending on where you live, toxic family dynamics running businesses in the community. So it would just be great to see that as one of the outcomes.
Absolutely. Will we treat each other, whether as a corporate entity or as a familiar entity, right? That face-to-face, that human, that's bringing that back. Appreciate that. All right, I saw Steph drop his email in the chat. If you guys are comfortable with that, feel free to do the same. I want to invite anyone to reach out to our fellows and see how you can support. And if there's something that you'd like to share that you would like people to support right now, feel free to come off mute and do that. Otherwise, in the audience, I want you to drop any final questions you might have, any final curiosities that we possibly can engage. And do any of you guys have any call to actions for any existing projects that you'd like to shout out?
Yes,
All right.
trying to get on camera. Oops. Okay, oops. Okay. This is Rev Deli with the Soil and Souls Cooperative. We have joined with First Nations here in the Hudson Valley to create the Indigenous Mothers Community Land Trust so that we can collectively secure land. We're looking at 102 acres. We're looking at a place to bring together our farmers from New Jersey and our farmers from in the city to do healing and business and marketing development. You can see our crowdfunding campaign. I'll put that in the chat, but we're here. We are open to conversation. We're open to cooperation. We're open to even some more Zoom meetings. I'm on sales, so let me go. Peace.
Yeah, appreciate you, Rev. So with that, I'd like to invite folks to continue this conversation with us. As I said, this is the first in 4 sessions where we're going to be exploring the multiple dimensions of this initiative, from the fellows to the host sites to the other aspects of this project, such as the mentors, the people who are giving their time to ushering in this new future we're referring to. All right, so just want to appreciate everyone's time for being here. Please continue to reach out to the fellows as the information is in the chat, and stay tuned. The next event will be March 22nd at 4 p.m. And then the next workshop that people might be interested in tuning in, where we are going to explore this dynamic with our host sites, be April 19th at 12 p.m. April 19th at 12 p.m. So be on the lookout. If you haven't subscribed to the Co-op Monthly, well, you get the registration information, and you can continue to join us on this journey of navigating the complexities of today's co-op ecosystem and to create a new future, one that is cooperative. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.